Good afternoon, class. Any doubts you have what we discussed yesterday? Intermediary T-bills. Anything else? Where did you read intermediary T-bills? So I'll just give you a brief overview again कि हुआ क्या था, so that you have a clarity. And see, use these 3-4 classes हैं ये. Use these 4 classes to ask whatever you have not understood from the basic macroeconomics. Use those particular doubts, whatever you have not understood in terms of the terms, concepts के interlinkages कैसे हो रही हैं, ताकि फिर सर्वे बजट आसानी से पढ़ा जाए. Because if you don't, you're not able to make sense of that, you will not be able to know how to use it. Then the whole exercise is of no use. So these 4 classes are just to make sure that you understand each and every term, and then the term when it is whatever they are mentioning with respect to that term, then how you have to use it. 3 stages हैं. पहले वो चीज़ें समझ आनी चाहिए, वो चीज़ें फिर आप उसको relate कर पाओ in the survey, and third is how to use that survey. 90% of the times what we have seen every year what happens is when the survey comes everybody has a huge excitement कि survey है, हफ्ते बाद किसी को नहीं पता survey में क्या लिखना कैसे है. Because there have to be techniques how to use that, and a lot of questions directly from prelims and mains are driven from the survey itself. फिर वो link हो नहीं पाता because you don't know how to read it, and even if you read it you don't know how to use it. So this is why I use those to understand the basic concepts. What is debt, what is deficit, how are they related, what is the problem which they have discussed. So the 16th Finance Commission or even your this survey both have talked about के center ने fiscal discipline अच्छा बना लिया है, states का भी poor है. So that state fiscal discipline, I gave you an idea how that has an implication for the economy. So these things, वो implication पता होगी तभी समझ आएगा कि इन्हें discipline होने के लिए क्यों बोल रहे हैं. Otherwise, you'll not be able to relate why are we saying that. Same thing I'll discuss today if there is time, current and capital account. I'll tell you how. The survey has predominantly mentioned one thing कि current account deficit से India की जो interest cost है वो बढ़ती जा रही है बहुत. On the capital head, whatever we are borrowing from outside, that interest cost is becoming huge because of a persistent deficit on the current account. And if you understand current account and capital account, then only you will be able to make sense ke what is happening with so many trade deals and what is the impact on the balance of payment for India. चीज़ें ठीक भी हो सकती हैं, चीज़ें खराब भी हो सकती हैं. Niti Aayog in 2020 had carried out a paper that whatever free trade agreements India has signed, most of those agreements are being used against India. Import बढ़ता जा रहा है, हम export नहीं कर पा रहे उन countries में. So if we have to use these FTAs for our strength, first you need to understand the basics के if we are not able to use those FTAs, problem कहाँ पे है? For those basics would be clear. I'll tell you what exactly we discussed yesterday so that just tell me if you could not understand anything here. We started with the discussion on what is a budget. In the budget I told you there is a classification of revenue head and capital head. A basic question they used to ask a lot in 2015, 16, 17. And if they want to make the economic section of the paper easy, they can ask again, which we saw last year. If they want to make it difficult, they can take it to any particular level. Whatever we discussed, उससे भी आगे एक step जा सकता है. You'll find it in survey and budget. They can ask question on trends. They can ask number of things. Last year they asked a question on what is revenue and what is capital. Revenue is based on what? Or what is the difference between the two? It's based on asset and liability. If there is a long-term impact, that is capital. If it is short-term, that is revenue. Revenue has an incoming, that is revenue. Receipts, and revenue has a revenue receipts includes what? Tax and non-tax. Expenditure. What is first non-tax? Non-tax, I told you two differentiation you remember, administrative and commercial. Something which the government is selling for a fees and something which is turned in terms of administrative functions. Fees, fines, penalties, all of that is coming in the administrative function. Apart from that, you also have in administrative function, you can include interest payments, what the government is receiving. Any dividends or profits, what the government gets. And finally, we have another term that is property which does not have a legal claimant. This is what is your tax and non-tax classification. Then the government spends money on revenue head. What is that? The government spends on salaries. The government spends on subsidies. Subsidy is a major topic both in survey and a topic in 16th Finance Commission analysis. What they are saying is subsidies are being given. Subsidies are mostly not, subsidies are not creating any asset. Since they are not creating any asset, but this is a burden on the government, So till when can you give those transfers? So what the survey has talked about, you will discuss in detail, कि conditional होने चाहिए transfers. It should not be unconditional, because this is a huge revenue burden, and we are creating this burden, we are compromising our asset structure. We will not be able to create capital expenditure if you are giving subsidies. And the second thing they've talked about, first, there should be some conditions on basis of what you are giving subsidies, and second, there should be an exit clause. Sunset clause or exit clause, that means you need to define why you are giving subsidy and when you are going to stop it. That stopping the subsidy is what they have talked about in both the documents. So this has a complete area of discussion, because this has distorted all of the expenditure of the government, because my capacity building will not happen if I spend most of the money here. And this is being talked about in the context of distribution of cash to women in number of states. That is the reference being used here. Apart from that, what expenditure? Interest payments which the government can make. Schemes, welfare subsidy hai. Schemes broadly cannot be mentioned under revenue or capital head. You have to tell what exactly is the component of the scheme. If the scheme is building infrastructure, that will go there. If the scheme is just giving money for welfare or any production related, that is coming here in under subsidy. Under expenditure, the government is also giving grants. Grants both to states and also to other countries. Both of them are being included here. Then under capital head, we have one is your capital receipt. What is capital receipt? Capital receipt is government getting money. Government gets money when it is either disinvestment or the government is borrowing. In borrowing, I gave you a complete idea, borrowing internal and external. Internal is mostly from market, government securities being issued to the market. Three major sources I told you. One is to the market, the other is the ways and means advances and option, and third is the NSSF, the securities issued to NSSF, which then forms a part of debt. The external is what we talked about, was three components. What were those? Multilateral, bilateral, and other government debt. I told you SDR from IMF is not a debt, but it is just used for accounting. The second is the FPI in government security. Here I told you three routes: medium term framework, voluntary retention route, and fully accessible route. Meaning of these terms should be clear. You could have a concept like question in the exam, okay, what do you mean by fully accessible route? What do you mean by medium term framework? Already last year they've asked a question, can the FPI invest in government securities or not? So basic question has already been asked. They can go one step ahead here also. And when we talk about this external debt, I'm talking about external debt only of the, I'm not talking about external debt of the entire country. External debt of the entire country has other components also. This is external debt only of the government. When we say the external debt profile, we mean the entire country's external debt. So there is external commercial borrowings, there are trade credits, there are NRI deposits. All those three terms will also be included along with these three. This is what is your total external debt as part of borrowings. Then the second part is expenditure. What are the expenditures which the government can do? The budget is focusing on capital expenditure this year. कौन सी PPT है? In expenditure, this is the major form of the budget, that we are going to spend a lot of money in creation of asset, that is infrastructure. And also the expenditure can be when the government is giving loans. Then expenditure is, what else? Where the liability is being reduced. What is liability reduction? The repayment of loan, not interest, repayment of the entire loan. Okay? ये लगानी है. Is this whole picture clear? Whenever the FPI comes in government securities, how much of investment is allowed in what instrument? There are regulations. What are these investment limits is specified under medium term framework. This is the series of government securities. You can invest up to this much, 10% in this full, the security which we have launched. So how much you can invest in what security is mentioned under medium term framework. In some securities I allow without a restriction, that is called as fully accessible route. In some securities, I'm saying you have to retain your investment in the country for some times. I'm going to give you relaxation on your investments. Regulatory relaxations milenge under voluntary retention route. These two have been in news in the last 1 year. This is why I gave you a reference to, so that you understand what exactly is the change in regulation. Ye terms important hai, so that it makes sense what is being talked about. Any doubts here? No, not the specific details. Specific details, see, the exam is general awareness, GS बोल रहे हैं उसको. तो सारे subjects का basic idea है कि नहीं है. This is what exactly is needed. So regulation can give one step ahead कि FPI is allowed or not, but it cannot ask you what are the exact conditions. Technicalities of any regulations you see, they don't ask. Recently polity में थोड़ा change हुआ है कि laws regulations पूछने लगे हैं, but that is again governance related. Economic regulations very less. If it comes, if it is a chance, financial market का regulation पूछेंगे. Financial market is literacy. Financial market is something which a lot of people, retail participation has increased multiple times. So retail participation, that means you should know what are futures and options. You should know some basic idea about future and option regulate kaise hota hai. So that is an idea. Why? Because we are expecting that people are investing in our stock markets. So people should understand the stock markets as well. So this is why if you see last 3 years, there are a lot of questions related to financial markets. They will go one step ahead also in that because of the retail participation increasing in financial markets. Kaise? So, the grant which is being received by the government, definitely. Non-tax would be grants received by the government. That can be included. Is this clear? Any doubt in this? RBI, FEMA regulation, the Foreign Exchange Management Act 99, they will regulate. If you understand the function of RBI manages the debt on the behalf of the government. Though the government has created, there have been two major changes in the functions of the RBI. One is your public debt management cell जो बनाया है government ने. Idea ये था कि debt management contradictory function है RBI के लिए. So we need to create a public debt management agency which is outside RBI. But we created with Ministry of Finance a public debt management cell. The second major change is, you know about payment and regulatory systems? Who regulates payment and regulatory systems? It's the RBI under the Payment Settlement Systems Act of 2007. Now this was also being seen as a controversial function because RBI also creates payment functions. For example, RTGS and NEFT RBI नहीं बनाया है. There are other systems also जो automated check payments होती हैं, and there are debit systems also जो ECS debit है, that is also created by RBI. Now you can't be a functioning player and also a regulator. You can't be a player and the umpire at the both. This is why they've created a payments regulatory board. That payments regulatory board is still under the RBI as of now, but this is a separate function which they are trying to move away from the RBI. So public debt management cell and the payments, the regulatory board are important developments. Ministry of Finance. हाँ ठीक है, वापस लगा दो बोर्ड, वो कर लूँगा मैं. Are these particular components clear? With this, we also discuss the meaning of deficits. Understand the meaning of revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, primary deficit, and fiscal deficit. Are the meanings of all four clear? Then how are we financing fiscal deficit? I gave you an idea of what the government borrows and then what exactly is the debt profile of the government. In the debt profile, that is the center government debt, I told you there are three components. One component is called as public debt. Public debt is internal and external public debt. External public debt, I've already given you an idea what exactly is external public debt. Other government debt, the second is multilateral and bilateral. These three components. Internal debt, I told you, are two things. One is the marketable securities. In marketable securities, I told you there are dated securities, T-bills and cash management bills. See why I was telling you this is important. In one of the years, I think 2019 or 18, they asked a question, out of the total debt of the government, maximum component kiska hai? That was dated. So they gave a statement that dated securities form the maximum part of the internal government debt which the government has. So that is a question that is directly coming from the economic survey. When you read the economic survey fiscal chapter, you'll find what exactly is the status report on all three. I'm just telling you the classification part. Then the second part was non-marketable debt. Now, non-marketable debt, I told you, where the government has done certain functions, has taken money from different sources. What are those? One is the special securities which the government has given to NSSF. So I've taken money from the market, I've also taken money from NSSF. Compensation bonds, I told you one example here, that was the sovereign gold bonds. I'll tell you one more example here. Till 2014 for diesel, for petrol, and till 2010 for diesel, the government used to decide the price of the final product. Right now, petrol and diesel are not priced by government. When they used to be priced by the government, there would be a subsidy burden. The government would have to give. What are the three major subsidies of the government where the government spends the maximum money? First is the food subsidy, roughly around 2.3 lakh crore rupees. What is the second? Fertilizer subsidy. What is the fertilizer subsidy? Urea and DAP. There are different mechanisms for both. Somewhere around 2.1 lakh crore rupees is what government spends on fertilizer subsidy. And the third subsidy is the petroleum subsidy. It used to be on petrol, diesel and other petroleum related components. It's only left on LPG. There is no other subsidy which the government gives for any petroleum related products. Now when the petroleum related products, I am asking the oil marketing companies to sell the petrol diesel for a particular price. Their market price is something else and the government related price is different. The difference has to be paid by the government. If the government can't pay the difference, government instead what has done is, has issued them, I have to give you X amount of rupees. I can't give you, so I'm giving you a security that I will give you X amount after 10 years. Till the time I don't give you X amount, I'm going to pay you the interest. Is this making sense? These type of securities are what are under compensation bonds, where the government had to pay money for certain purposes, did not pay the money, instead issued bonds. Sovereign gold bond is also one type of compensation bond where the government was asking the people to stop importing gold, instead put in the money in a bond. That money is also to be given by the government. Another, I told you, special securities which have been issued to international institutions for our contributions. This is a non-interest bearing security. Then another, the first part is in fact this, is a 14-day intermediate treasury bill. Now what exactly is this instrument? This 14-day intermediary treasury bill is whenever the state government has mismatch in its finances for short term, it can solve that mismatch with the center. What is short term mismatches which you can have on your finances? If the state government has surplus cash, what they can do is they can give that surplus cash to the center and the center is going to give them a 14-day intermediate treasury bill. I am going to take whatever cash you have and in turn I am going to give you an intermediate treasury bill for taking this cash. And once you need this cash again, I am going to discount the bill which you have, I am going to take that back. So for managing the temporary cash flows of the state government, center issues 14-day intermediate treasury bills to them. Same instrument can be given to central banks outside India also. That if you want to manage rupee balances with us, you have excess rupee, you give to us, I'm going to give you a 14-day intermediate treasury bill. If you want to take money from us, I'm going to buy this back at a discount. Treasury bills are again discounted. It's not a interest payment in the interest bearing instrument. This is also a part of the debt of the government, which is part of its non-marketable securities. Is this making sense? External we have already discussed. This is one part of public debt. Is 14-day intermediate treasury bill clear? Then the one more non-marketable is also your, are the dynamics related to ways and means advances clear? There are different types of ways and means advances. For the center, ways and means advances are only normal. There is no special. That means no special investment is what we are seeking from you. Only one type of facility. And where is this facility mentioned? Section 17, clause 5 of the statutory hai ye. Agreement definitely signed in 97, but this is a statute-based agreement, a statute-based financing instrument which is available to the government. Under the, for the center, it is, you can take money for, but with, remember why repo is important? Market discipline. I want to have that particular borrowing on a discipline. It's not that you're taking money and taking it at a very low interest rate. Then there is an overdraft facility also which is available for 10 days, but it is repo plus 2. See what UPSC has done for these type of questions, they are not going to ask you repo plus 2. They are going to ask you a very basic question, can the center borrow money from the RBI for temporary purposes or not? What exactly is the time duration, or is there an overdraft facility available or not? So statement based question, not specifically on the features, but what exactly is happening. Is this activity allowed or not? For the state, there are two types of WMA. One is, that is called as special drawing facility. What exactly are the interest rate and features for this? If they invest in consolidated sinking fund or guarantee redemption fund, what is the interest rate? Repo minus 2. If they invest in certain government securities, it is repo minus 1. So in the last 1 year, if you have made these annual increment to these particular instruments, you are going to get loans at lesser rate. Then the normal WMA, that is for repo 90 days. And there's an overdraft facility. Here itself, it is overdraft facilities repo plus 1. That exists for 14 days was the usual time limit. During the pandemic, they had extended it to 21 days. Overdraft is, if you want to take up to WMA limit, that is repo plus 2. And if you want to take WMA limit plus, that is repo plus 5. ये दोनों instrument 5 दिन के लिए मिलते हैं सिर्फ. Post that you have to correct this particular state, or RBI is going to stop payments. There is no such restriction. There is no defined limit के excess कितना ले सकते हैं. Time limit की restriction है. We wanted to enforce time limit restriction because I told you when the government was borrowing from RBI, it was never returning the money back. This is what led to permanent inclusion of money in the economy, which is then inflationary in nature. Remember I told you वो खत्म होने के बाद एक और security देके वो पैसे वापस replenish हो रहे हैं. Are these facilities clear? Yes. Overdraft for states, when they take up to the limit. So if their limit was given as 5,000 crore rupees, so if I take 3,000 crore rupees more, that means up to the limit I'm taking more, then I will charge repo plus 2. But if I want 8,000 crore more, that means I'm going more than 100% of my limit, then I'm going to charge repo plus. Are these facilities clear? This is what is your public debt. This public debt, why it is different? Because this public debt is what is put to vote. This is part of Consolidated Fund of India. And if you see, हमारा fiscal deficit यहीं पे include हो रखा है. The whole fiscal deficit you will find here itself. However the government borrows, these are the functions only. बाकी government की liability है, but that is not a borrowing which the government has done. This is the borrowing part. I did not borrow it. I have taken money for number of purposes, but that was not a borrowing for the managing my budget. For example, the small saving scheme is the government getting money from people, but that is not I wanted it to borrow. When I had to do borrowing, I took money from that fund. So that is my borrowing part. This is why this whole part is what is called as the public debt. No, not all of the money in NSSF. I am saying NSSF has X amount. From that X amount, I want to have a borrowing limit. So I said, give me some money. For that, I issued a security. The remaining part is still my liability, but under the public account. So the small saving schemes have all of the money here. And I was going to borrow from the market. But I realized I have another source from where I can borrow. So I issued them securities and they gave me some money here. Now what is my liability? NSSF has 10,000 rupees. Out of that, 2,000 has been given to the government. Now the liability here is, in this 2,000 I will also earn something. The interest earning, say for example, I earned 500. So this total 10,000 minus 500 is the liability which I have on public account. Because I've also earned money here from this particular security. Similarly, there is another thing where number of funds will always be accumulated with two particular financial institutions. One is insurance companies and the other is pension companies. Because pension companies require the money post 60, annuities होती हैं वो भी हर साल मिलेगा. And second, insurances, not everybody is going to come and claim. So premium उनके पास काफी deposited है. So the post office life insurance fund has a lot of money. So the government said, I will go to NSSF, I can also come to you and take this money from you. So I'm using some part of your money. Why? Because I had a borrowing requirement. Yes, this is also my liability, but liability of coming under different heads. This is not my borrowing requirements. ये पैसे हमने और purposes के लिए लिए हुए हैं. This was never that I wanted to manage fiscal deficit. This is why this whole public debt component, we say fiscal deficit is taken on consolidated fund of India when your budget sees a mismatch in revenue and expenditure. This is why this whole part is what is your fiscal deficit. That is your consolidated. What I'm saying, not whole part is fiscal deficit, but ये combine होता ये बना है. But fiscal deficit हमेशा इसी में से आएगा. यही borrowing है जो government की है. Marketable and non-marketable securities. Is it making sense? The second part is what we discussed was the public account liabilities. Public account liabilities, that is the money kept on NSSF. Any other or provident fund of state. That is your public provident fund. State provident fund. Public provident fund is different. Or any other relief fund which the government has created, taken money from. These are your public account liabilities. And the third component here is, which is also called as extra budgetary or off budget borrowing. Is this clear what exactly is the debt classification? Any doubts in understanding of the debt? Iske pattern ab survey and budget se you can understand. The next part is, I discussed why the government needs fiscal discipline. Fiscal discipline, fiscal rectitude, fiscal prudence, fiscal consolidation, all mean the same. Why fiscal discipline is important? Why can't the government increase its fiscal deficit and the debt to whatever level it wants? Why can't this happen? I told you number of reasons. First is your macroeconomic stability. What is your macroeconomic stability? First, demand pull inflation. Because government is going to spend more, that money is going to create more inflation in the economy. What else? If I am having demand pull inflation, I will also create demand for imports. If I create demand for more imports, I will have current account deficit. Current account deficit and fiscal deficit is what I told you was twin deficits. Current account deficit can also spill to the outside economy. That is your permanently long-term impact what you can have. Because from where are you going to get the dollars? This is going to come from borrowings. Now consider this borrowing. Ye statement mention ki hai, both documents, 16th Finance Commission and also survey has mentioned this a number of times. If I am going to borrow, what exactly is the cost of borrowing? If my fiscal deficit, if my current account deficit is consistently high, what exactly is the impact on my cost of borrowing which I do from outside? It will definitely increase. This is what they are talking about as a problem for not increasing investment in the country, that the cost of borrowing for the dollars which we are taking outside is increasing, and the reason is current account deficit. So you are able to maintain the stability of rupee at a particular point by spending reserves, but spending reserve is not having an impact here. I'll discuss that component also when I discuss balance of payment. Reserve से आप rupee को stabilize तो कर रहे हो, but still the cost of borrowing is increasing because you have a major imbalance on your current account. In fact, this 1, 2 and 3, this was your 91 crisis. Started with this, spilled over here, and then finally created a problem here. When we were not able to pay this, this is where we had a problem of pledging of gold and then getting a loan from IMF. Then what else apart from this? I told you about the debt trap. Why does the debt trap happen? Because of the increasing amount of interest payments. What else? There is intergenerational equity. The future is going to pay for consumption of present. The future does not get a benefit. The future is going to pay a benefit. A particular investment has been done in the name of future, who the future is taking responsibility. In fact, दोनों में ही future की responsibility compromise. I'll tell you how. Fiscal deficit is increasing. That means I am making an expenditure today. What all expenditure can I make? One is I can increase your consumption, or I can increase my capital, right? Out of the two, which is completely useless for future? इसका तो कोई फायदा नहीं है future को. Even if I'm making revenue, say I'm paying salaries to teachers and I'm paying salaries to in hospitals, that is also not a benefit for future. Why? Because 20 years later, those same people are not going to continue in the same job. So I was just paying the salaries of the people for which I had borrowed, and the burden of this is to be a tax on future. Now if I build some capital asset, this should be a benefit for future. Why we can't say even this is not a benefit? Why even this is not a benefit? ये तो कंजम्पशन तो ये हो गया, ये तो एसेट बना ना जो बार बार यूज सकते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल यहाँ पे एक रोड बन गई. Anything else? The whole point is, if I am going to pay a tax, where the money is going to be spent, this is to be voted in the parliament according to my priorities of that time. If I am paying the tax today, my government should vote for what the expenditure is based on what are the conditions of today. You have already made, which I did not agree to. The whole point of voting on the budget is, does the house agree with priority of the government? But here, you did not ask me. You already gave me a road and you're telling me the road is important for you. If the road was important for me, why am I paying for it? This should have been paid from the previous generation taxes. If the previous generation is building a road on my money, I should have a particular vote on should this road be built or not. This is why both ways I have a problem of intergenerational equity. That the future has to pay taxes for those things which the future did not vote for, did not agree to the priority. This is why passing the bill in the budget in the parliament is important. That this is my priority. If you don't agree to priority, that means you don't agree to me having the control of finance. This is why the government fails if the budget fails. That major finance pe hi control nahi hai government ka, that the house is not agreeing to the priority. But since we have a parliamentary democracy where government holds the majority in the parliament, that voting is infructuous ke zyada kaam ki nahi hai. Until unless the government ministers or MPs itself vote against his party. This is a major drawback in parliamentary democracy in India, being representative democracy के government part है parliament की. Separation of powers complete नहीं है like we have in US. This is why whatever the government wants, the parliament would agree, and the nature of how parliamentary democracy works in India, we see how the government has the say in the parliament. It's very difficult to defeat the government because of why it's very difficult to defeat government. It's the biggest problem is anti-defection. Anti-defection is where you have to follow the whip, otherwise you're going to lose your membership. So individual MP की फिर voice खो जाएगी. He has to agree to whatever the party is saying. This I'll tell you is a problem with FRBM also, because FRBM again is a parliamentary law, but again we have government which is running most of the things. Any other problem? That was your crowding out. That is, interest rate is going to be high, and secondly, the amount available for investment would be. I told you this crowding out is happening because of state government securities coming in the market. I discussed how center government is still controlled it, but state government has become a now major player, due to which the crowding out is happening. The interest rates in the market are increasing. Is why discipline clear? The next question is how the discipline should be enforced. See, there are two things here. Either let the government enforce the discipline through discretion, or enforce it through. So this is a debate, this is a global debate. Should we allow the government to follow discipline according to whatever they want, that is discretionary discipline, or we have to bind the government, not just the present but the future, with the law? FRBM is a law-based fiscal discipline. It's not discretion whenever the government wants it. The nature of democracy in India is parliamentary. This is why it feels that parliament is equal to government. फिर वो discretion का element आ जाता है. Problem with discretionary is that if you allow the government to make fiscal discipline rules whenever, whatever they want, these rules will always be inconsistent. Time inconsistent, that means the government might say when the government has won elections that we are going to control the deficit. But the moment the election comes near, the government might increase the fiscal deficit just to win the elections. This is why what we try to do is we try to bind them by rules or laws. The second major benefit of discretion is it's not just time inconsistent, it is also about what exactly is your medium term and long term discipline with respect to fiscal deficit, which binds not just the present government, but also the future governments. So for example, if the government this year said, we are going to have a debt to GDP target of 50-50 plus minus 1 to be achieved by 2031. Now 2031 is where the government which is present today might not be there. Chances come hai, but still it might not be there. On paper, it is a chance that they can lose the elections in 2029. But it is still binding the next government to the target which is set here. Why? Because it is a rule-based target. So the whole idea of having a law is that the law is not just binding the present government for changing its rules, but is also binding the future governments. In order to do this, the government in 2003 passed the FRBM 2003. I'll tell you the whole journey of FRBM and how exactly we reached here. This is going to make sense, how the government has also moved away from FRBM without amending it. Now, when the FRBM was passed, the government, what are the features of the initial FRBM? The government says, we are going to reduce our fiscal deficit and revenue deficit. How much it is being reduced, until when we have to reduce, these things were not mentioned in the act. These were mentioned in the rules passed under the act. If you know about delegated legislation, at some points what happens is, the parliament does not have the time and the expertise to pass a complete law. It will pass a framework law and allow the government to fill in the blanks. So what they did here was, in the law they said, government is going to reduce fiscal deficit and revenue deficit by this percentage till the time period of this. उन्होंने दो dash छोड़ दिए. This fill in the blanks is to coming from the rules which the government will frame. So for example, if the government has passed the Citizenship Amendment Act, it's a framework law which comes from the parliament. What are the rules of the law will be framed by the government. This concept is what is called as delegated legislation. This polity may you will have discussions. There are number of questions also on delegated legislation in both prelims and mains. So they said fiscal deficit and revenue deficit has to be reduced. Now how much it has to be reduced? The rule said in 2004. Rules were passed in 2004. Rule said, I will reduce the fiscal deficit to 3% and revenue deficit to 0%. They did not just give a final goal, they also gave intermediate goal that you have to reduce the fiscal deficit every year by 0.3% and reduce the revenue deficit every year by 0.5%. And finally achieve 0 and maintain 0. Finally achieve 3 and maintain 3 by the year of 2008-2009. So the first thing, we are binding not just the present but also the future by having these rules of reduction targets. The second thing they said was, the RBI is not going to monetize the deficit anymore. इन्होंने date set किया था that 1st January 2006 से RBI is not going to subscribe to this is permanently not allowed. I'm just telling you this happened in 2003. There were changes made to this. The third thing FRBM said was that every year along with the budget, the government has to place 3 documents. 2 questions have already been asked on these 3 documents in the prelims paper. The 3 documents which they have to present is, first is medium term fiscal policy statement. That what exactly are you going to do in the next 3 years with respect to certain indicators. What are those indicators? 6 indicators. You have to tell what you are going to have the target for these 6 indicators in the next 3 years. So that I just don't have the picture of present, I also have a picture of the future. What are those indicators? I will ask you what is fiscal deficit. Rolling target होंगे 3 साल के, which is going to roll from 1 year to the next year. This is what is 6 indicators for the next 3 years. What are you going to plan for them? This is medium term fiscal policy statement. The second statement they are saying is, what exactly is your fiscal strategy to achieve this? First, set a target of medium term. Second, tell me the strategy to achieve this. And finally, what are you expecting as the macroeconomic framework of the country in the next 3 years? Macroeconomic framework as in, What is the inflation you expect in the next 3 years? What is the GDP growth you are expecting in the next 3 years? What exactly is your analysis on current account deficit? What is your analysis on foreign exchange reserves? This is your broader idea of economy. This is the indicator you'll set, and this is how you'll achieve it. So along with the budget, you have to tell me the medium term and long term idea also of the economy of the next 3 years. This is your accountability here. Is this making sense? They added a fourth document also in 2012. In 2003, they just talked about 3 documents. The next thing which they said is that, and this is why rules and laws are important. If there is a particular slowdown in the economy, slowdown could be a number of reasons. Then who is going to stimulate the economy in terms of slowdown? For example, if pandemic hits, if there is an event where you have consumption slowdown, you have investment slowdown, and also the global slowdown, exports are not increasing. So which particular agent is going to stimulate the economy? That is going to come from. Now if the slowdown is to be expected to be solved by the government, in that cases, where exactly is the government going to find the money for solving this slowdown? RBI तो हमने बैन ही कर दिया. From where are exactly you going to borrow? Because now you have now a target of. This is what is called as the escape clause. If you think there is a war or national security concern, if you think there is a natural disaster concern, or if you can define whatever you think is a problem, you can move away from your target. This is what is the trigger you can have whenever you feel there is a slowdown. But this trigger given to them to escape was quite broad. They said whatever you feel is important, which means the government will find a number of reasons to not implement this law, because I can always trigger the escape. So 4 major features of the FRBM. 3 documents: RBI printing of money not allowed for borrowing purposes. The 2008-9 tak, these are the targets, and finally I have escape clause. These are the broader features I am telling you. The Finance Commission asked the states also to follow this. The 10th Finance Commission onwards started creating pressure, and by the time 12th Finance Commission was being set up, all the state governments also passed FRBM. Name of the act is same. The Punjab government FRBM law, the Haryana government FRBM law, the name is the same. Broader term given to them is fiscal responsibility legislations. And all the 28 states in the country have passed their own FRBM acts. There is one more function where exactly the government can create pressure to them to create this FRBM, though this was done under the 12th Finance Commission recommendation that every government started doing it. Another thing where the government can force the states to pass such an act is, which the survey and both the Finance Commission has asked the center to use on states, that is Article 293 Clause 3. Now what is this Article 293 Clause 3? 293 talks about borrowings of the government. So 293 says center government can borrow from anywhere inside India and also outside India. State government cannot borrow outside India. And the third statement, the third clause, what they say is, if any particular state has taken loan from the center, they cannot borrow from the market without the permission of the center. If any particular state has taken loan from the center, which all states have, they cannot borrow from the market without their permission. And how do they enforce this permission? Every year, what states can borrow from the market, the limit is set by the. So if the state governments are borrowing more, you control that borrowing through this article. If the state governments are borrowing more, they have to take permission, ask them to pass a FRBM. Change the rules of their FRBM so that there is more discipline. So the center uses Article 293 Clause 3. State also does off-budget borrowings. I told you what are off-budget borrowings. What are off-budget borrowings? When the state is not giving money to its, instead asking the PSU to borrow from the, this particular borrowing is responsibility of, but today this state can control its. What is happening here, and this is again discussed in detail in both these documents. A particular state, say for example Kerala, established a particular institution, the Kerala Investment Infrastructure Fund. They are not giving money to this, because if they give money, their fiscal deficit will be out of control. Fiscal deficit has to be controlled because the fiscal legislation says, and also government has a limit which they have imposed in Article 293, Clause 3. तो ये तो नहीं बढ़ सकता क्योंकि लिमिट सेट है एंड खुद का भी लॉ है. बोथ थिंग्स आर रिस्ट्रिक्टिंग द स्टेट फ्रॉम बोरोइंग मोर. So I did not give them borrowing because I could not do this. Instead, I asked the KIF to borrow from the, this is off-budget borrowing. Last to last year, center said, whatever your PSUs are borrowing, this will also be counted under your fiscal deficit. In order to enforce discipline, तो अगर हमने आप पे लिमिट लगाई कि आप मार्केट से 2% ही अपनी जीडीपी का बाहर से बोरो कर सकते हो, आपने 0.5% यहाँ से ले लिया, तो I am going to count all of this. Earlier, this was not being counted. This has happened to Kerala. And Kerala has challenged this in the Supreme Court. If they are asking me to stop here, where is the constitution saying that this cannot be done? And if you are imposing a limit, on what basis are you imposing the limit? The figures are coming from where? Give us an explanation of that. So Kerala government suit is still pending in the Supreme Court because the center government asked the states to include this in their limit. And they have to do it because of Article 293. ये केरला ने अभी चैलेंज किया हुआ है. इसी के ऊपर और डिस्कशन है बोथ इन द सर्वे एंड फाइनेंस कमीशन रिपोर्ट्स. Why? What limitation? Fund of the state? Absolutely not. Because state is a sovereign entity created by the constitution, not by the center. Both 265, 266 say that center did not create states. Center and states both are duly elected by the people whose role and functions are defined by the. तो अगर उन्होंने खुद ही लोगों से चुन के आए हैं तो whatever tax they are collecting, they can spend whatever they want to. Center cannot tell them anything here. But if they go fiscally imprudent, that means they are borrowing too much from the market. And they also have taken a loan from me. First thing is this. I can only tell them to stop borrowing if they first have to give me a loan. If this loan is absent, then there's no limit on borrowing. 265, 266 distributes the responsibility between center and states. That means states are not dependent on center for anything. It's a constitutionally distributed responsibility. States do not owe their existence to the center. They owe their existence to constitution. So people are duly elected, are electing them. So for example, state of Tamil Nadu, the government is being elected by the people. It's not answerable to the government of center. I can use my money wherever I want. This is what the states are complaining. GST के बाद ये compromise हो गया है. Because I can't impose tax. It's part of GST council. और वहाँ हमारी voting power बहुत कम है अकेले state की. So that is compromising fiscal federalism in the name of efficiency of collection of tax. GST system can see a very big change. हो सकता है 2 साल के अंदर because states are constrained on finances and if they're constrained on finances, they'll not be able to perform. If they don't perform, they'll not win elections. होने वाला है बहुत बड़ा problem with respect to GST. Off budget borrowing is when the Kerala government did not borrow, it asked its PSU to borrow. So on the budget, I did not show this borrowing because my PSU in its balance sheet is showing the borrowing. But since it is being done on behalf of my government, money will be paid by me only. This is extra budgetary borrowing or off budget borrowing. Is this making sense? सेंटर की लिमिट तो उन्होंने लॉ से लगा दी ना पार्लियामेंट के. स्टेट्स की बोरोइंग इन द मार्केट is being limited by 293 and also states have passed FRBM. Every state has an FRBM and their own FRBM says the maximum limit is 3%. Over and above, center is also placing limit how much you can borrow. नहीं, इन्होंने तो 2019 में कैग की रिपोर्ट ने हाईलाइट किया कि व्हाट यू आर कोटिंग अंडर एफआरबीएम इट्स नॉट ट्रू बिकॉज यू आर डूइंग ऑफ बजट बोरिंग. 2021 ऑनवर्ड सेंटर स्टॉप डूइंग इट. In their public debt, I have to tell you my fiscal deficit, public debt, my account liabilities, and also extra budget. 21 के बाद वो एक्टिविटी करनी बंद कर दी सेंटर ने खुद, and then enforced it on the states from next year onwards. So this Finance Commission report, Finance Commission has number of chapters. In that chapter, they said it's commendable that the center has stopped off budget borrowing, and it is also enforcing on the states to stop it. It should never happen. They clearly mention there. Survey also mentions this कि off budget borrowing अब बंद हो चुकी है सेंटर की तरफ से. Is this clear FRBM? लॉ है. डिस्क्रिशनरी कैसे हो सकता है? डिस्क्रिशनरी इज आई एम नॉट टेलिंग यू एनीथिंग, टुमारो आई अनाउंस समथिंग, दैट इज माई डिस्क्रिशन. नेक्स्ट डे ऐसे कि 4 नहीं 4.5 कर लेंगे. 4.5 उसके बाद मुझे लगा खर्चा ज़्यादा हो गया, आई सेड 6. दिस इज डिस्क्रिशन, बट नाउ इट्स नॉट डिस्क्रिशन. I am telling you till 2008 I am going to achieve 3 and maintain 3. Every year I am going to reduce by 0.3. So now under FRBM I have to tell you every year what is my target. Things have changed in this. I'll tell you how they have changed. What? इसमें GST काउंसिल से कैसे इम्पैक्ट होगा? स्टेट के ऊपर लिमिट लग गया हाउ मच दे कैन बोरो. फाइनेंस कमीशन ने बोला FRBM पास करो, सेंटर ने 293 के अंदर लगा दिया. Now, if the state government has to make expenditure for any particular purpose, from where will they find the money? For example, Tamil Nadu government raised this question that I want to start a breakfast scheme. Midday meal is already there, uska distribution is center state, everything is decided. Now I want to start a breakfast scheme for my children in the school. How will I find the money for this? Now I can't find the tax sources immediately because direct taxes are mostly with the center. So what exactly is the tax sources I have? Mostly is your, but indirect taxes, who decides the GST rates? It's the council, not the center, council. वो center automatically हो जाता because voting power is center plus states, and states are also having governments which are close to center. Same ही government है. So decision making of Tamil Nadu government already gone. Why? Because majority will be reached by other. So that means I don't have any control over this, or I have very less control over this. So how do I finance this expenditure? The next thing is I will finance this expenditure from my, now deficit, you are saying that you have every state has its own FRBM, and then you also have limits on. I told you yesterday in the class that they are doing this. That means most of the states are themselves not following their FRBM. They are expanding because this is a necessity. Why? Because this is politically very important, or social welfare wise it is important. Say for example, a government announces a cash benefit transfer to the women just before elections. This is a fictional scenario, not a real thing. उसके पैसे कहाँ से लाएगी government? A government which is already poor is not able to give a lot of other infrastructure services, but has promised 10,000 rupees to one section of the society. From where are they going to get that money? Now you see in this particular scenario, जो गवर्नमेंट सेंटर चाह रही है आना, वो तो ये कर सकती है. वाई? बिकॉज वो खुद तो ये इम्प्लीमेंट कर नहीं रहे. इस पे हम उनको लीवे दे देंगे, अलाउ कर देंगे, कर लो बहुत ज़्यादा, या अगर आप कर लो तो हम देखेंगे नहीं. और जिस स्टेट को करने नहीं देना है, देन both things can be controlled. This is what both things they have said, कि you should control because this should not be in this. So in this particular context, what becomes important? In this particular context, what becomes important? This capacity of the state becomes important कि tax बढ़ाओ अपना, own tax revenue increase करो. How do you increase your efficiency? States फिर आएंगे कि तो सब हम आप decide करते हो. So what are the states doing? In this particular case, what are the states doing? What are other taxes? Alcohol they can increase, yes, definitely. What else? Petroleum, alcohol, they can increase the taxes. What else? Tolls तो फिर रोड बनानी पड़ेगी ना टोल के लिए. What can the states do? And states are doing it. Recently, one of the states passed a particular cess called the orphan cess. I can increase what you said. Some of the tax are still under the state. Either I can increase this or I can impose a. Himachal Pradesh government has done that. Himachal Pradesh government also has a milk cess. A milk cess is for improvement of the dairy sector, but the cess is imposed on alcohol. Similarly, whatever heads of taxes I have still, which are not part of GST, उस पे तो मैं council के बिना पूछे cess लगा सकता हूँ. Other cess I have to ask the council. For example, Kerala government was given this particular waiver when there was this Wayanad flood, that you can impose a cess because of this particular situation, but that is GST related. This is why they had to ask the council. But other tax heads which they have, on that they can impose cess. This is what some states are doing to increase their revenue capacity, because expenditure is something which they have to do, and this expenditure will become all the more critical. I'll tell you this in center-state relation. In one of the schemes which the center has is centrally sponsored schemes. Centrally sponsored scheme, you have distribution of funds between center and states. Most of the schemes have 60 to 40. Center is saying this should be converted into. That means I need 10% more. From where will I get that 10? If the center is, and this is going to be a break point between center and states, because I'll tell you, Finance Commission ने कोई grant भी नहीं दिया इस बार. They've not given any grants. They've given the same amount, 41%. They've tweaked some numbers so that some states which were complaining get more. Otherwise, they've not increased any particular grant. They've stopped 3 types of grants which were given before. 15 Finance Commission. So grants are not coming. You have more burden under the schemes, and your revenue capacity is compromised by. Now you see how lopsided federalism has become. Why this federalism was created such in 1947? Because we had certain peculiar reasons. Because we had to create the whole, unify the whole country. Other reasons also. But now the situation has changed. Number of changes have happened in the last 75 years. We should have seen more power being devolved to the states, but instead we are seeing more consolidation of power with the center. And what is key to all of this is not just the politics, that is your political scenario, how you manage that, it's your finances. आप इसको कंट्रोल करके सब कंट्रोल करा सकते हो. इसी इलेक्शन नहीं जीत सकती कोई भी पार्टी दूसरी आएगी, because if I'm giving you 10,000, they can't promise you 10,000, because then they will talk about fiscal consolidation and fiscal discipline. So money, finance is what is being used for achieving strategic goals. Definitely, it is affecting. On paper, तो बिल्कुल. Reality, you see, GST Council is that we wanted to create one nation, one market, tax differentiation now ho. So this is why states came together with the center. Those in this Mohit Minerals case, the Supreme Court said that you can go away from GST Council because Constitution still says you have your own taxation powers. Constitution आप center पे dependent नहीं करता. Then how will the states manage their indirect taxes? Breaking this whole market, you first have to have some market of your own, and you don't have to be dependent on the center. The alone state cannot do. This is if center comes in and states, if this can only happen if there is a coalition government at the center. Coalition government will come with state support. Till the time that does not happen, states will not get it. And they don't have any other way out. I'll tell you why they don't have a way out. Is this clear? No, that they are saying within a particular time frame which the fiscal council should tell, but the act did not amend it that way. There's no time limit. I'll come to that. Time limit is what they have done. In 2018 and before that also, they moved away from this. So CAG in 2017 said कि FRBM में जो लिखा है और जो आप कर रहे हो दोनों अलग है. CAG reported this in 2017 that you've used the escape clause and using the escape clause without mentioning what exactly the reason was, and there's no time limit also. So act is one thing and implementation of the act is another thing. In 2018 also they did this. They moved from the escape clause and the fiscal deficit increased from 3.3 to 9.2. Now FRBM said only 0.5 is allowed. I'll tell you, 2018 amendment said only 0.5, but they moved to 9.2. And in 2021, the finance minister said, "Ke, I am going to amend the FRBM next year and we are going to include these changes," but no amendment happened after that. So the whole picture of FRBM is still a law. The implementation has changed because these things are not being followed. Something else is being followed because the government can create the law. Or the government can create the rules without amending this. I'll explain one by one. There's no time limit. Agreed, because the center government said we are going to give you revenue benefits. Revenue benefits that till 5 years, and this is also part of public debt. This is also special securities. They said 2 things or 3 things. Economically, 2003 se hi, there were committees that indirect taxation is a major problem in the country, or problem ye hai that if my tax structure is too high, people will stop paying taxes. And this was happening. This is why you will not get the bill, because sales tax koi nahi bharna chahta. So leakage hai. Plus efficiency in the whole supply chain is not happening because the input credit is not being given. These 2 inefficiencies, they said GST. Now the state said, if we come into this GST system, what is the benefit which we are going to get? Center promised 2 things. First, they said, let us assume that GST does not give you benefits. We'll keep you safe that certain high revenue items is what you keep outside GST. So this was the first promise. And if you think after 5-6 years, that GST is giving us benefit, we'll bring them back into GST. So there are three major items which are outside GST. One is alcohol, the other is petroleum related goods, natural gas, crude oil, and three petroleum, petrol, diesel and ATF. ये 5 items बाहर हैं. And third major was electricity. These three are what we are going to keep outside so that you have confidence in us. The second thing they said is, till the implementation 17 में launch हुआ, for 5 years, we are going to pay you compensation if you are not getting 14% growth in your revenue every year on the base of 17. 14% growth in taxes does not happen, so we are going to pay you. इसके लिए इन्होंने एक GST compensation cess भी बनाया कि यहाँ की collection जाएंगी एक अकाउंट में और वो यूज होगा यहाँ पे, कुछ items पे लगाया cess. Now 14% is something they could not get when there was pandemic. 1920 was not expected, and this happened when GST got implemented. Now every state started asking. So 2021 में, I did not have enough cess to give to all states. So center said to states कि you borrow from the market, हम आपको बाद में पैसे दे देंगे. State said कि we will not borrow. Center borrowed from the market and gave it to the states. Now when center borrowed from the market, center also has to pay for this. Center said we are going to extend the cess. ये 2022 तक cess होना था. And compensation had to be paid till 2022. They extended the cess till 2027 and they did not extend the compensation. तो ये क्यों extend किया 5 साल? क्योंकि हमने ये, जब हमने मार्केट से बोरोइंग की, हमने मार्केट को एक सिक्योरिटी दी होगी फॉर दिस इन द नेम ऑफ GST compensation to be paid by the states. This is part of my internal non-marketable debt. Special securities issued for paying the GST compensation. जो non-marketable securities 5-6 बताई थी उसमें ये भी है. Confidence कैसे बनाया? 14% growth और compensation and high revenue items outside GST. Is it clear? Coming back to FRBM, yes. No, ये आज की न्यूज़ है कि हेल्थ सेस कलेक्ट हुआ है और वो स्पेंड नहीं हो रहा है. This is today's front page, I think, in one of the newspapers. They've given a box and they said this is the collection in the health cess and this is the amount which they're spending. They're not even spending there. The money is being used somewhere else. This money is being used for a lot of cesses somewhere else, was reported last year by CAG. This is why, if you remember, I told you in budget that when you forecast and when you check, you need a fiscal council. ये तो गवर्नमेंट तो आपको नहीं बताएगी, फिर कैग बताएगी, बट कैग के एक्शन टेकन रिपोर्ट क्या होगा जब पार्लियामेंट में रिपोर्ट आएगी. बोथ थिंग्स आर हैपनिंग. जस्ट रीड द न्यूज़पेपर. आज की न्यूज़ है कि हेल्थ सेस यूज नहीं हो रहा है. कैग लास्ट ईयर सेड कि ये यूज कहीं और हो रहा है. इट्स नॉट बीइंग यूज्ड. इट्स नॉट इवन बीइंग ट्रांसफर्ड टू दैट पर्टिकुलर फंड. फाइनेंस कमीशन इज सेट अप बाय whom? Who sets the finance commission? Is there any participation of the states? There's a report, newspaper report, Indian Express or I think Hindustan Times reported this. 2014 में जब गवर्नमेंट आई थी तब 14 फाइनेंस कमीशन का अवार्ड आने वाला था. YV Reddy was the chairman. So there is news, the newspaper said, the Prime Minister created pressure on the chairman to reduce the funds. कि 32 से 42 वो बढ़ाने वाले थे and there was pressure from the government to reduce that. You can't give more money to the states. YV Reddy in response said that this has already been done. This is something which we have to give. तो वो 32 से 42 हो गया. तो नेक्स्ट वाली जब आए उन्होंने, if you see, both have given 42 only. No one has increased the divisible pool. So states had made the representation to both the finance commissions that you should increase the divisible pool or increase the number because हमारा developmental expenditure बढ़ता जा रहा है. नंबर दोनों ने नहीं बढ़ाया 41 और divisible pool में this time state said के include the non-tax revenue also. Constitution does not say that. They said include so that our divisible pool increases or find a mechanism to include the cess and surcharge. दोनों चीज नहीं करी उन्होंने. Because if you see, the president will appoint the finance commission and the Finance Commission Act of 1951 says these are the 4 eligibility criteria for 4 people and the 5th chairman should be this and all of the 5 will be appointed by the center. States have absolutely no role in finance commission. It was expected to be a neutral body so that states' considerations are also, they are getting the money which they should get. But if there is influence of center on constitutional bodies such as Election Commission of India or Finance Commission, you will find lopsided policies. इलेक्शन कमीशन के ऊपर भी प्रेशर बन सकता है, अगर बनाए तो. हो नहीं रहा है, हो सकता है. ऐसे थोड़ी ममता बनर्जी सुप्रीम कोर्ट पहुंच गई है. इज दिस क्लियर? FRBM के 4 कंडीशंस क्या है? नाउ व्हाट हैपेंड टू दिस? 2.1 तक ही फिस्कल डेफिसिट आ गया in 2007-8. But in 2007-8 you had the global financial crisis. So in 2008 the government said, we are going to stop the implementation. This implementation will be stopped till the outside conditions improve and the domestic conditions are there. We are further going to make changes to the act. They resumed the act in 2012 and made 2 amendments to it. First, they said that revenue deficit should not be reduced to 0 because we are also giving money to the states for building capital expenditure. So fiscal deficit of 3% we are going to achieve till 2015. Revenue deficit has a new target of 2% and effective revenue deficit will be, this will be made 0. These were the 3 new targets in 2012. To be achieved by 2015. The second thing they said, there are 3 documents which you have to present. That is medium-term fiscal policy, fiscal strategy and macroeconomic framework. इसके अलावा you are also going to tell us what is your medium-term expenditure framework. Medium-term, whenever we are talking about 3-year timeline. Now with the budget 4 documents have to be presented. Every year with the budget this happens. In fact, this target of 50 plus minus 1 and fiscal deficit is mentioned here. ये last year ही हो गया था, इस बार फिर दोबारा न्यूज़ में आया, but this happened last year itself. Two major amendments. Now 2012 amendment is happening, but 2014 you have a new government. 2014 when you have a new government, in 2015 they say, we can't pass this or we cannot do this discipline. Instead we are going to implement this target by 2018. So in 2015, without amending the act or rules, the government said we are going to implement the target by 2018. This is what was CAG reported, कि आपने 15 से 18 goal shift कर दिया, ना ही escape clause का कुछ mention किया, और you also did not amend anything. This is what the CAG highlighted. In 2017, they said that we also need a review of FRBM. FRBM was passed in 2003. The global and the domestic condition has changed. So now we are going to review the act, whether this act is in line with what exactly has to happen with discipline. For this, they set up a panel under the chairmanship of UPSC framed one of the prelims question also on NK Singh review panel. NK Singh review panel said what? They asked 3-4 statements there. Now NK Singh review panel said, when you are setting targets on fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, this is every year you have to achieve something, which will become operationally very rigid. Operationally, this becomes rigid because you are constrained by the targets. You can't increase your expenditure. So this is controlling what the government can do. Operationally, this target is very rigid. So what they said is, you should actually target debt to GDP, because this is a flow concept measured every year. This is a stock concept. Largely government ka debt to GDP should reduce, and this should reduce by having a goal present, that is telling us what is the present debt to GDP, and then what you will achieve after 5 years, and you have to follow a downward trajectory after a particular time period. You have to achieve that. Understand carefully what they are saying. First, don't be operationally rigid. Instead, have a target on debt to GDP, and it should not be a every year target. It should be a glide path, where glide path means the debt to GDP should be on a downward trajectory. So if in 2017 I am saying my debt to GDP is 60%, just an example. In 2021, this should be reduced to, so within 4 years, I have to come from 60 to 50. I am not going to give you a target every year. ये नहीं होगा. No intermediate targets. just an end target, and end target should be gliding downwards. This is what is called as a glide path for fiscal consolidation. Government accepted this in 2021 itself. Is glide path clear? Is the first concept clear? Fiscal deficit target is operationally rigid. I will not have it. So what is my target? It's actually, and debt to GDP should be gliding. Is this clear? That every year you are telling me that you have to achieve, say this year I have 3.8, next year you are saying 3.6. Now I can't make it 3.7 also, even if my condition allows me to do that, because my target is 3.6. Now I'm saying it's 3.8, not debt, not fiscal deficit, it's debt to GDP, and it has to come from 60 to 50. These 5 years you can do anything, but it should have to come down. This is operational rigidity. Now, if I have to reduce debt to GDP, is this glide path clear? If I have to reduce debt to GDP, how will I do that? Your debt will only reduce when your reduction will happen on. So operational target is still fiscal deficit, but the primary target or the anchor is. तो आप अनाउंस तो यही करोगे हर साल, बट प्राइमरी आपको टारगेट ये करना है. इसके हर साल के गोल नहीं होंगे. This is why the government only told this year that we are going to have 4.3 next year, but did not tell what will happen in 2028, 29, 30 और long term target क्या है. उन्होंने बोला long term target है 30-50% यहाँ का. Next year का operational target ये है. That means every year I am not targeting. Is this making sense? See, this is what is the present scenario. So I'll explain here, then I'll tell you glide path जो present scenario है. Before introduction of this glide path, how exactly are we targeting the fiscal discipline? We are saying fiscal deficit has to reach 3% by 2018. Let us say हम 15 में बात बोल रहे हैं. तो हमने दो चीजें की. 15 में हमें बताना है कि fiscal deficit हमें 0.5 से कम करना है. ये तो FRBM said this, कि you have to reduce fiscal deficit by 0.3 every year. So I have an every year target, and I have a. That means in any scenario, government does not have any amount of flexibility. Only exists if I use the. Without escape, I have no flexibility. Every year I have to reduce deficit. They are saying deficit is not a good enough target for long term. What instead you do is you target debt and tell us what is the final target you are going to achieve after 5 years. ये हर साल का target आप नहीं करोगे. This is what is called as a glide path with debt as the primary anchor. And if I have to reduce debt, actually तो deficit reduce होगा तभी debt reduce होती है. तो हर साल fiscal deficit कितना reduce करोगा ये आप budget में बता देना. So you're not bound by any fixed goal every year. You only have a glide path. Say for example, 57% is my debt today. I am saying after 5 years my debt will be. These two recommendations were accepted in 21, finally got implemented in 25 last year. You understand two things only here. One, fiscal deficit is not the primary target. Fiscal deficit is the operational target. And the glide path is being followed, not fixed goals every year. Two major things. Glide path means I have no intermediate goals. I only have one end goal. This is what is the meaning of glide path. And second, primary target is debt, not fiscal deficit is a target, but that is an operational target. Is this clear? How can that happen? How can I answer for someone? You tell me you know the concepts, ये कैसे लिंक नहीं हो सकते? हर साल का fiscal deficit तो debt में जाएगा और debt है क्या? If I borrow, very simple scenario. Day one, you earn 10 rupees and you spend 15 rupees. So you have, from where did you get the extra 5? You had to borrow. So this borrowing is rupees 5. Next day you spend 20, you earn 15. Again you had a borrowing. Borrowing is what? 5 is your fiscal deficit. How much is your debt? हर साल की बोरोइंग ही तो ऐड होगी ना पिछले साल की बोरोइंग में, वही डेट है. दे आर सेइंग डेट प्रॉब्लम है, हर साल की बोरोइंग प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. तो अगर आज ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम है, ज्यादा बोरो कर लो, बट क्यूमुलेटिवली डेट कम होनी चाहिए, नेक्स्ट ईयर कम कर लेना. दिस इज वाई दिस ग्लाइड पाथ एंड नॉट हैविंग ऑपरेशन फिक्स टारगेट ऑफ फिजिकल डेफिसिट. अगेन आई एम टेलिंग यू दिस इज अ recommendation. What happened on this recommendation, I'll continue the story. Our glide path, primary target and intermediate target is clear. Operational target is clear. For example, monetary policy का target क्या है? 4 plus minus 2. How does it achieve that? By changing money supply. So उसका primary target किस चीज पे है? 4 plus minus 2 तो इन्फ्लेशन बनाना है. तो इन्फ्लेशन वो कंट्रोल किस टूल से करते हैं? टारगेट क्या करते हैं? कंट्रोलिंग द डिमांड ऑफ मनी. हाउ इज द डिमांड ऑफ मनी कंट्रोल्ड? बाय चेंजिंग द पॉलिसी रेट. पॉलिसी रेट इज व्हाट? रेपो रेट. बट व्हाट इज द ऑपरेशनल टारगेट? रेपो रेट इज द प्राइमरी टारगेट विच वी हैव टू कीप, सो दैट वी हैव टू डू दिस. हैव यू हर्ड ऑफ वेटेड एवरेज कॉल रेट? वेटेड एवरेज कॉल रेट उसका ऑपरेशनल टारगेट है कि जो हम चेंज कर रहे हैं वो मार्केट तक पहुंच रहा है कि नहीं पहुंच रहा है. कॉल रेट इज अ बैंक टू बैंक, इंटर बैंक लेंडिंग रेट. सो वेटेड एवरेज कॉल रेट में वो रिफ्लेक्ट हुआ है नहीं हुआ है. सो मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी का ऑपरेशनल टारगेट इज वेटेड एवरेज कॉल रेट. Just if you read the monetary policy document on the RBI website, you'll find these two statements, that we are going to target inflation, but this targeting of inflation will happen through the policy rate. Policies are primary. The operational is what is coming from weighted average call rate, कि हमें market में actually change देखना है. Similarly, primary target is debt, but how will the debt change when I'm changing the deficit? Operation तो fiscal से ही होगा, but primary हमें target क्या करना था? Is this making sense? The second thing they said, the after glide path, so FRBM review committee, NK Singh panel, first they are saying is you have to target debt to GDP, and second they are saying fiscal deficit is going to be your operational target. %50 of GDP. ये सारे परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी ही हैं. जीडीपी इज वन नंबर विच वी अज्यूम के दिस इज अ स्टैंडर्ड मेजर. वी कैन काउंट एवरीथिंग एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ दैट स्टैंडर्ड मेजर इवन इफ इट इज नॉट रिलेटेड, बिकॉज द स्टैंडर्ड इज समथिंग विच वी आर सेइंग इज ऑथेंटिक. सो एनीथिंग कैन बी. सो जीडीपी ऑफ द कंट्री इज, दिस इज आई एम एस्टिमेटिंग एट 2.07 lakh crore, 270 lakh crore और 2.7 ट्रिलियन, राइट. दिस इज माई जीडीपी. अब ये स्टैंडर्ड नंबर मेरा आ गया. डेट टू जीडीपी इज समथिंग विच कैन बी रिप्रेजेंटेड एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ दिस नंबर, दैट विल बी एक्स. तो हमेशा वो परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी ओनली, एंड फॉर ऑल ऑफ दीज कैलकुलेशंस इट्स नॉमिनल जीडीपी, नॉट रियल. इट्स द टोटल डेट ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. 56 पॉइंट समथिंग है, वो 50 तक लानी है नेक्स्ट 5 years में, 30-31 तक. इज दिस क्लियर, दीज टू थिंग्स? The third thing they said, since government is not good with numbers, you have to implement or bring a fiscal council. Fiscal council, I gave you an idea. How to escape, when to come back, give better numbers. Independent एक budget office होना चाहिए. This is going to help you improve your quality of fiscal data and also give you accountability. One is data and second is accountability. How? If you have set a fiscal deficit target of 3% and you have to go to 3.5 because there has been an escape condition. This, what is the escape condition? How will you use this money? How will you get back? And what is the time period for getting back? ये सारी चीजों में हेल्प आपको करेगा. Impose accountability through an external body. Otherwise, the government is being part of the parliament will never tell you true. So, improving the quality of fiscal data and improving this. Consider, why was the stock exchange consistently tanking before the India-US deal? Why was the stock market? You've seen this particular news कि बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रही थी, डॉलर भी सेल कर रहे हैं लोग, गोल्ड एंड सिल्वर में जा रहे हैं, स्टॉक्स भी बहुत सेल हो रहे हैं. Why were people selling off all of these stocks? Instability of US. See, Indian stock market, whatever money is mostly coming from Now, why is FPI returning? When we said our economy is in a Goldilocks zone, says inflation is controlled, we are trying to balance our current account deficit, and third thing is we are managing our macroeconomic stability के 3 features होते हैं. External imbalance, internal money, and third is your growth picture, which comes from your fiscal deficit, how much you are borrowing. Right? Now all of the 3 are positive. Inflation is controlled, current account deficit, tariff का जो impact होना चाहिए था उतना नहीं आया. Even after tariff, we were doing better. Why? Because India started diversifying its exports. Third, fiscal deficit is under control and GDP one of the highest. 7.28% is what we are saying. Now, after all of this, why are people exiting? US deal के बाद 2 दिन अब हुआ है stock exchange में बहुत बड़ा push. Why before that this was happening? One consistent commentary coming on the Indian economy is people don't trust these numbers. You are saying 7.2, people don't trust your GDP numbers because your measurement of GDP, you have not revised your base year, your methodology is flawed. Your inflation methodology is flawed. You're not measuring what the actual inflation is. This is why there is a change in all of these numbers now. The CPI index is being revised. The GDP, the base year will change, maybe the methodology will also get revised. It's your lack of trust in the numbers which you are saying. This is not the true picture. इसी को improve करने के लिए they are saying bring a credibility comes from numbers only, and these numbers, if they don't, the world does not accept them to be true, you're not going to get investment. Now after US deal and also the changes which we are making, we are expecting the things to turn back. इसीलिए बहुत eager था, the country had to sign a US deal because we need a lot of those FDI and FPI coming in the country. Otherwise we are going to have a massive problem. Diversification might happen with other countries, but that is going to take a long time. But US dependency is something which we can still continue. Is this making sense? What is the importance of fiscal council? And finally what they said was, you have to make the escape clause specific. Escape clause can be triggered under only these conditions. National security, you have a disaster or any particular natural calamity, or your real GDP falls by 3% or more on an average of the last 1 year. You have agriculture output being substantially destroyed, or you are having any structural reforms that are going to impact the expenditure of the government. Now escape clause is firmly defined. It can only be triggered under these conditions. How much you can escape is only 0.5%, and for this 0.5% you can ask the only deviation allowed is 0.5%. This is what exactly is the new escape clause. Only based on these conditions are you going to apply the escape. 0.5% is the deviation allowed, and since deviation is something which you are not going to find money in the market at the same time, तो उसके लिए आप RBI को print करने को बोल सकते हो. Only for the deviation amount you can ask the RBI to print. If the real GDP falls by 3% or more as compared to the average of last 1 year, 4 quarter के average पे अगर 3% fall हो गया, if the government is doing any structural reforms which has an expenditure implication, just like monetary policy committee, we just need more people from outside to have a different point of view which can enforce. Otherwise people are going to come from the same country. You just have to make sure they are independent. This is why these 4 constitutional bodies were created: Election Commission of India, Judiciary, CAG, and your UPSC, so that the government does not influence. Otherwise, if the government influence, you're going to turn into Pakistan. With over a period of time, this is how the state capacity is destroyed. Credibility gets destroyed, that the people are employing their own, the government is employing their own people in bureaucracy. The CAG is not telling the true picture what is happening. Elections are not fair. So the whole state capacity will destroy, and this state capacity will lose credibility in the global affairs also, and फिर आपका investment आनी बंद हो जाएगी. इसीलिए तो ये countries failed है ना. The government did not. It should. It did not. The government wants more control over what the budget is. This is why you see this year budget, what exactly the distribution has been. Is this clear? Based on this FRBM review committee, the government amended the act in 2018. In 2018, there were few major amendments. First, they said, the only operational target is fiscal deficit, no longer are we going to target. This target is by 2021, we are going to reach 3%. And finally, what we want to achieve is debt to GDP. This target will be 40% for center and 20% for states. Again by 21. What the amendment said, we are not specifying the timelines. Government themselves specify the timeline and adhere to the timeline. उन्होंने rules में बोला कि timeline is 21. The third thing they said is that in any year, government is not going to take guarantee of loans on more than 0.5% of GDP. I told you guarantee that the state takes guarantee for the loans of its PSUs. Yesterday I told you about guarantee redemption fund. Guarantee redemption fund was center or state is taking responsibility for its PSUs. Contingent liability. वो liability तब बनेगी जब वो fail होंगे. Similarly, center cannot take guarantee on loans in any particular year for more than 0.5% of GDP. So if the center is taking guarantee for FCI, this guarantee for FCI from the market cannot exceed एक साल में 0.5 तक ही आप किसी और की गारंटी लोगे. You will not take guarantee more than 0.5% of GDP. And finally, they had made the escape clause, whatever the encasing panel said. This particular thing was accepted. There is no mention of glide path, primary target or operational target as of now. सिर्फ ये बोला fiscal deficit 3%, no longer revenue or effective revenue, debt to GDP 40-60, 40 center, 20 states, government guarantee on loans and escape clause. UPSC asked this question, this statement. They said encasing panel recommended for how much limits on center and state. So they said 20 for center and 40 for states. And the second statement they had framed was the present liability of the government, center government is 48% and for the state government is 19%. Third statement was center government has to allow the states to borrow from the market if states have taken loan from the center. These were the three statements asked, two on encasing review panel and the third statement was Article 293 Clause 3. This is already asked, 2018. Is this clear? Now, 2018 is the amendment to be achieved by 2021. But 2019 to 21, what happens is pandemic. Now, if you have a pandemic, escape clause is only allowing you a deviation of. The finance minister made this statement that 0.5% will not be enough because the situation is dire. So our fiscal deficit was somewhere around 4%. It shot up to 9.2%. So in 2021 budget speech, she made a statement that now I'm going to target fiscal deficit and I'm going to reduce it to 4.5% by 2025. Last year, what the government said, in 2025, that no longer will the government have a target on fiscal deficit. We are going to have a glide path and the target will be debt to GDP, which will be to be achieved by, and this debt to GDP target is only for the, this is why the commentary right now is that if the center has set this debt to GDP target of 50 plus minus 1, why did it not set a target for states? States should also adopt this. 2026, the government has reiterated this stand and said we are going to achieve this by 2031, that is the glide path on debt to GDP. And second, fiscal deficit is what we are going to next year. Why? Because this is an, which is to be announced in the, this is our present picture of fiscal discipline. Last year, budget fiscal deficit target was, again this is So the present picture is, in 2026, my debt to GDP is 56%. I am going to bring it to, by 2031. There is no intermediate target. This intermediate target will be announced only in the budget. So last year announced hua tha. This year what they have announced is, next year they will announce something else. Next year they will announce something else, so on and so forth. Ab glide primary and operational is clear. Glide path 56 to 51. Primary target is 51 and operational target is fiscal deficit, जो हर साल budget में announce होगा. This year they have announced is 4.3. This is your picture of fiscal consolidation presently. Now you see FRBM 2021 में she made a statement in the budget that next year we are going to amend the FRBM accordingly, but no amendment has happened. तो जो budget में बोला गया वही मानना है अगले 5 साल without an amendment to the FRBM. FRBM in 2018 still says 2021 तक को clear करना है. Is the picture of fiscal consolidation clear? This timeline is what is going to give you clarity. Now you will not face problem in fiscal consolidation. Yes, yes, definitely. ये सारे government, why will I create something? FRBM they have not amended. They did not say glide path. Glide path last year के budget में बोला है, वो भी budget में नहीं बोला. Glide path उन्होंने the medium term fiscal policy में बोला. They said, gave a introduction. In the introduction she said, FRBM target was 2021, 60% debt to GDP, 40 center, 20 states, and 3% fiscal deficit. But we could not achieve it due to COVID. ये second para बोला. Third para she said, कि now we are moving towards debt to GDP as our primary target with a glide path. Now the document is very not clear कि primary target debt to GDP है, glide path जरूर बोल दिया कि intermediate target अब नहीं रखेंगे, final रखेंगे. Fiscal deficit is something which we are going to still target. This was 2021, 2025. This year there's a complete clear statement that debt to GDP is primary, annual glide path, no intermediate target, fiscal deficit as the operational target. Last year वो थोड़ा फिर भी clear नहीं था, अब तो बिल्कुल clearly बोल दिया, इसलिए news ने बहुत cover किया. Last year fiscal policy statement only said 2 things: no intermediate targets, glide path, fiscal deficit is still our target. Primary है, operational है ये नहीं बोला था, ये अब बोल दिया है, operational है, primary हमारा debt to GDP है. इसी context में survey is saying you have done it for yourself, force the states also to do such thing. Use Article 293 or create pressure to amend their own FRBM to implement what you are doing. तो जो हमने fiscal deficit से चले गए दूर, उनको भी यहाँ पे लेके आओ, because they have not made the change till now. This is what the survey is talking about, and even the Finance Commission is talking about. Is this clear? Glide path is saying that I am going to study more. Today I am studying 4 hours. After 6 months, my average time will be 6 hours. This is glide path of increasing time. You don't have every month, every week targets. तो आपने glide करना है, चाहे वो downward trajectory हो, upward trajectory हो. आपके glide path का एक ही मतलब है, intermediate targets नहीं है. Right now you have one number. After 5 years you have another number. You have to glide towards it. Glide means you can go up, you can go down, you can go up, down, depending on what the operational situation is. But जाना downward ही है. ये जो downward trajectory है, straight line नहीं है ज़रूरी हो. तो अगर इस साल आपने 4.3 बोला है, next year the situation does not improve, you can go to 5%. But this 5% is going to distort debt to GDP. Next year you are going to cut to 3.5%. So आपके ये 3 गोल हमने नहीं बताए, ये आपको freedom मिल गई, ये और ये गोल बताया बस. So this is why I'm saying fiscal deficit will be announced in every budget to give you operational freedom. So last year, 2025, she said that we are going to achieve 4.5%. This was said in 2021. In 2024, she said we are going to achieve in 2025 4.4. 4.4 was achieved. 2025, the next target next year was, 4.4 was for 2026. This got achieved. Next year target is 4. तो हर साल बताएंगे क्या करेंगे. But finally जो achieve करना है, that is. Now you see we have moved away from FRBM a bit. All of this is said as part of your budget. This year budget, this is the statement. 56 point something, 56, 57 है. It's sustainable. Debt is not high. Is discipline part clear? All the dynamics with respect to FRBM and what is the present scenario. Now, one more small topic is your fiscal federalism. Balance of payment, I don't think we have time. Now, why should center give money to the states? Why should the center give money to the states? You know Finance Commission? Apart from Finance Commission also, I'll tell you the complete dynamic of center giving money to the states and how they give money. Why should they give money? In 1951, what we believe is, and ये एक reason था कि हमारा lopsided क्यों है constitution, we believe center administration is strong. That center is something which we have a number of people and also the national leadership which can run the country because of their prior experience with whatever they were doing in the national movement. The units that are states, this is where we find that there is weakness with respect to development of both politics and administration. If you see the national movement in the country is not a decentralized movement. It is a central movement running for British India, mostly by the Indian National Congress. This is why Indian National Congress, वो लीगर आयर बनी गए ब्रिटिश के कि उन्हीं को सब पावर मिलनी थी, because how centralized they kept the operations. And they had run these governments at provincial level, so they also had some experience of governance. 1937 elections, before that also there were elections, so they were having that experience, and there was no such party or no such people which could run, they did not have the experience for it. So if they have the experience at the center, I am saying my tax collection efficiency is going to be very strong at the central level. And this is true till date. Efficiency of tax collection is better at center as compared to the states. But if I have to develop my country, the most of the development has to happen through the whole three-tier governance happens. Why? Because we want to reach as close to the people. The idea was, and this is what the original idea of federalism is, that center should be responsible only for three things. Center should never be responsible for any activity beyond these three things, because it should happen at the state level or it should happen at the local self-government level. Because these two are the ones which are closer to the people and can understand development. The center for any particular country should only be responsible for three things. One is foreign affairs. The second is defense, and defense is what we are saying, defense from external threat, not the internal defense, which is public order, which is a responsibility of the state. And finally it is communication. Interstate communication should not be a problem. All units should be connected. These should be the three responsibilities. But due to the nature of political development in the country, we had to give more powers to the center. That means this efficiency of tax collection being more at the center, Article 265 is gave, that is the list, union list, got more heads of taxes. Most of the taxation heads were given to the union. Two major taxes from which they collect most of the money. One was the income tax, and the second was excise is a tax on manufacturing. But development is to happen through states. More money has to be spent. That means whatever money has to be collected here, it has to go to the states. So Article 270 of the Constitution said that income tax collected by the center should be distributed to the states, and Article 272 said excise duty collected by the center should go to the states. This is the initial development. The first 10 finance commissions used to follow this. So the idea is center is more efficient at tax collection, but distribution or development has to happen through states. So these two heads we have given only to the, so some part of this tax, 270 says income tax, 272 says excise duty. Just wait for it, these acts are amended. This is not the present picture. Income tax and excise duty has to be distributed. How much it will be distributed? It will be decided every 5 years by under Article 280. Now 280 says that the center tax has to be given to the states. How much will be decided every 5 years by the Finance Commission. How will the Finance Commission work? Finance Commission Act was passed in 1951. So the first 10 finance commissions are talking about distribution of only income tax and excise duty. 10th Finance Commission said the scenario now is changed. There are service taxes and other indirect taxes which the center is collecting. This should also go with the states. So 272 or 270 is amended in the year 2000. Ye present picture hai. In the year 2000 they said, Article 270, that is all the taxes collected by the union have to be shared with the state except few taxes. And what do they mention except few taxes? And this exception existed then also. Exception is what is mentioned under Article 268, what is mentioned under Article 269, the cost of collection of taxes, cost or the taxes for UT, and finally any surcharge which has been mentioned under Article 271 or any cess with the center is applying. Just wait, I'll tell you first, then you ask. 268 says union can decide the tax, but collection and appropriation will happen by the state. Tax on two things. They said tax on, and what they mentioned, stamp duty and excise tax on medicinal and टॉयलेटरीज. ये डिसाइड यूनियन करेगा टैक्स, बट कलेक्ट और अप्रोप्रिएट स्टेट करेगा. दैट मीन्स ये पहली स्टेट के पास आ गया, तो इसीलिए वो एक्सेप्ट है. 269 says union will apply the tax and also collect it, but give it to the states. What tax collect and give it to the state? That is interstate commerce में whatever sales tax happens. Apply and collection union, but given to the states. That means this is already with the state. So ये 268, 269 की exception है. After the introduction of GST, I also have interstate tax is gone. So they said 269 clause A, IGST जो हम states को already दे चुके हैं, ये भी exception है. ये 2017 में आया. So now what is happening? This is the total tax collected by the center. Out of this, these will be removed, and what we will get is called as the net tax with the state, that is divisible pool. All of this is mentioned under article कि सारे टैक्स जो यूनियन ने कलेक्ट किए except this has to go in the, this will be distributed between center and state. Now you can ask, what was the doubt? Two 270 is saying whatever taxes the union collects has to be shared between center and states except this. So 270 की है, union collecting all taxes have to be shared with the states. Exception list is, since after GST, I also have the concept of IGST on centers, the interstate taxes. तो वो वाला भी exception है क्योंकि वो state को already मिल चुका है. IGST कैसे लगता है? इंटरस्टेट पे जो IGST लगता है वो CGST और SGST का मिक्स है, तो वो 18% है फॉर 9 and 9, राइट? सो सेंटर टेक्स ऑल 18 एंड देन गिव्स 9 टू द डेस्टिनेशन स्टेट. तो दैट मीन्स 9% IGST ऑलरेडी दे चुका है वो, तो वो 9% यहाँ कल नहीं ऐड होगा. अंडरस्टैंड दिस होल थिंग, देन आस्क के क्या समझ नहीं आ रहा है. State 1 to state 2, if there is a transfer of good, I will collect. But who collects this IGST? Center. But इस IGST का एक component इस state को दे चुका है center. तो ये वाला component हम बोल रहे हैं कि ये union का tax में add नहीं होगा. जो union ने collect किया है 18%, उसमें से वो 9% state को already दे चुका है. तो वो ये 18 यहाँ count नहीं होगा. IGST लिया तो state ने, ये जो language है यूनियन ने टैक्स लगाया, यूनियन ने कलेक्ट किया, बट वो दे दिया, यही सेम आईजीएसटी है। तो जो सेल्स टैक्स, इंटर टैक्स था वो, और आईजीएसटी, दो दिस इज ऑलरेडी गॉन, सो इट्स जस्ट द आईजीएसटी। दिस इज आर्टिकल 269। Is this divisible pool and all taxes clear? Anything which you have not understood from this? There were two major things which were asked by the states this year. They said center is mostly collecting taxes from, पर ये तो आपने remove करा दिया. For example, is this whole picture clear? See what the state demanded this year. They said all of these exceptions you have removed from the total tax. For example, the case of petrol, the price of the final, whatever the market or the whatever the selling price is, there is center tax, there is state tax. Center tax is what? पेट्रोल डीजल पे क्या टैक्सेस लगते हैं? You have to know this. They already asked this question last year in CDS. Special additional tax वो ड्यूटी है, 3 सेस हैं. इसके अलावा उनका नाम अलग अलग है. One is special duty, special additional duty, and one is basic duty. वो 3 सेस हैं. Their specific name is different, their generic name is different. Their specific name is what CDS asked last year. What are the taxes imposed on petrol and diesel in the country? जो ये बेसिक टैक्स है, इसको हम बोल रहे हैं ऑन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, दैट इज, और स्टेट जो अपना सेल्स पे टैक्स कलेक्ट करता है, दैट इज, दिस इज अ पोटेंशियल क्वेश्चन. इस साल या तो प्राइसिंग पे क्वेश्चन आएगा, या एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्ट पे क्वेश्चन आएगा, या टैक्स पे क्वेश्चन आएगा, बिकॉज पेट्रोल डीजल रशिया क्रूड की वजह से बहुत न्यूज में है. रशियन क्रूड बीइंग रिड्यूस्ड, रशियन क्रूड बीइंग द रीजन व्हाई tariffs were imposed. So these dynamics, there's a high probability they can ask a question on energy, oil related. Now, what the center did last year, center said we are going to give a 10 rupee reduction on excise duty. They announced this. And they said states should also do that. But they did not inform that they added 10 rupees plus in. Now, people are not going to face the impact. Price to same rahega. But what is the impact here? I have minus 10 on tax, but plus 10 on cess. But what do I have to remove? This 10 plus 10 will remove. Why? Because it's 10. So divisible pool is shrink हो गया pool. क्यों मैंने टैक्स कम कलेक्ट करके सेस से कलेक्ट कर लिया. अब मैं ज्यादातर टैक्सेस हटा के सेस सरचार्ज से कलेक्ट कर लूं. What will happen to divisible pool? It will shrink. The state said find a mechanism to include cess and surcharge also in divisible pool. This was the first demand of the states. Second demand of the states was that right now what the Article 270 says, you only have to include the tax. You should also include, both the demands were not met. Finance Commission said this is not going to happen. You can only work with whatever the present scenario is. So the Constitution said center has efficiency in tax collection and the states have in distribution. So till the year 2000, some income tax and some excise duty was being given to the states. Who was doing it? It was still being done by Finance Commission. The second thing what they said was that how we are going to decide, that is again mentioned in the Constitution. These amendments happened in 2000, where Article 270 now all taxes minus this exception. I hope this exception list is clear. यही difference है total tax और Article 280 clause 1 says the Finance Commission will recommend the principle for distribution of net tax collected by the center between center and state. They don't mention total tax. They mention this is what is called as. Is this clear? So this is the first part of the picture. 16th Finance Commission has said what? That the total divisible pool which we have, this will be distributed between center and states. All of the states cumulatively are going to get 14th said 42, 15th said 41, and 16th says 41. 15th ने 41 इसलिए किया. This is what the distribution is. 13th Finance Commission had said 32%. 14th Finance Commission said 42. Why did they increase by 10%? Does anyone have an idea? जम्मू एंड कश्मीर तो ये हुआ, फिर 14 से 15 हुआ 41%. वाई? बिकॉज 1% अब जम्मू एंड कश्मीर का वहाँ यूटी में टैक्स बढ़ गया, तो वो हट गया. 16th ने सेम कंटिन्यू किया, दैट इज वाई दिस. नहीं, 13th, दिस इज 2026 to 31. दिस वॉज 20 to 25. एक और साल का इन्होंने पैसा बताया था पैंडेमिक का भी, 2021, फिर 21 to 25. दिस वॉज 15 to, there is one thing that is happening between 13 and 14. Planning Commission got abolished. Planning Commission also used to give money from center to states. That was Central Assistance to State Plans. ये पैसा खत्म हो गया था, इसीलिए इनको ये बढ़ाना पड़ा. One form of money was being stopped. This to this is Jammu and Kashmir becoming UT, and this is also the similar. They could have increased, they did not. So this number is important for us. Is this clear? Now the next thing is, once I've decided 41% to states, this is what is called as, the first step is called as vertical devolution. Now vertical devolution is done. Now how will I distribute the, within the states? 41% has to be distributed between, this is called as horizontal devolution. Now how should the horizontal devolution happen? On what basis and why? Why population area, anything, why? Give a reason why. किस स्टेट को कितना पैसा मिलेगा? There has to be some logic. This logic is given by Finance Commission. What could be the logic behind it? There are two things, two factors which everyone does. You can add more factors also. Principles. First, I will define principles. For those principles, I will define indicators. And for those indicators, not all indicators are important, I will assign weight. What are the principles? The first major principle is poorer states don't have resource capacity. If they don't have resource capacity, that means I need to help them more. Two major drawbacks which I have with the states. One, what is their resource availability? And second, what is their cost of production? एरिया बढ़ जाता है तो कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन भी बढ़ जाएगी. ये रिसोर्स अवेलेबिलिटी और कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज डिफरेंट इन डिफरेंट स्टेट्स. सो आई हैव टू हैव सम फॉर्म ऑफ, हर जगह तो सेम रिसोर्स अवेलेबल नहीं है. अवेलेबल भी है तो उसको यूज कैसे करेंगे, इसके लिए भी अवेलेबिलिटी नहीं है. सेकेंड, देयर इज कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज डिफरेंट. Cost of production in every state is going to be different. I have to have some amount of equity. I need to help the poor states more. It's not equality, it's equity. Help according to what exactly is the present situation. Same help nahi milegi sabko. If someone needs more, I'm going to give them more. Someone needs less, I'm going to give them less. But if I only work on equity, this is going to be a major problem for me. Why? If I only want to close the gap between rich and poor, then don't you think the rich states are going to complain? If we have become rich, doesn't mean we get less money. This is why I am also going to reward them for, or what we say is, equity and efficiency are the two factors which are created by most of the Finance Commission. Other Finance Commission also can use other factors. For example, what is the need of the state, or is the state facing any fiscal disadvantage? ये need और fiscal disadvantage को 16 Finance Commission ने equity में बोल दिया. So 16 Finance Commission said, we have equity where we are including need and disadvantage, and second, we are going to give it on the factor of efficiency. Two principles which they used, equity and efficiency. 15th Finance Commission had said need or disadvantage पे भी है. These two factors have been subsumed under the principle of equity by 16th. यही equity का ही मतलब यही है, need or disadvantage. Is this making sense? Now, if I have to have equity based on resource availability and cost of production, that means I have to see what exactly is the size of the state, and second, what are the number of people living in the state. So out of equity principle, including need, I have three major principles that I can create, and this is what these indicators they have created. First is, what is the level of population. Second is what is the level of area, and poorer states need to get more. I am using a criteria of income distance. I'll explain all three के क्या क्या use कर रहे हैं वो. Just an example. If population I'm giving a weight of 20%, what is the meaning of this? Just an example. What is the meaning of this? %20 of the total 41% which I got, जो X आया, इसका 20% population के हिसाब से मिलेगा. 10% is on area. Just an example. These are not the weights. 10% money out of this X will be given on the basis of. This is how I will give factors. So if I've given 45% to income distance, that means I'm giving this factor the maximum importance. So my importance of how much money will go according to what factor is assigned by weight. Performance and efficiency. What factors they've used? One, they have defined a factor of forest cover. Second, they have defined a factor of and third, they have introduced factor of tax and fiscal reforms was 15 Finance Commission. They have replaced that tax and fiscal effort by GDP contribution. And finally, they have one more factor is demographic performance, जो TFR से last time हुआ था. I'll tell you the weights also. This is your. Now you can note down. Now first factor is clear. What is the factor of population? Is that whatever is my population in 2011, based on that I'm going to give you the money. Second is demographic performance. What is the meaning of demographic performance? Understand each and every factor. Yeah, first note down if you want to. UPSC will definitely ask a question. Last 3 years, one consistent question is on Finance Commission. Consistent. Mains में भी आ सकता है. This per capita GSDP distance is income distance. Forest cover, area, demographic performance and population. Vertical and horizontal is clear. Now in this, understand one by one what all these factors are. These are the 5 factors, 6 factors. These 2 factors should not be a problem. Population according to what exactly is in 2011. Area also according to the number I am giving it to the different states. This is what I said, equity or need-based principle. Now what is income distance? This is the most important factor. If you see the weight, maximum weight is given to income distance only. And this is throughout Finance Commission, income distance ko weight karta hai. What they do here is, they rank all of the states according to what exactly is their per capita income. Now per capita income, what they said, how they have calculated. Last year 15 Finance Commission said, जो थर्ड पे है इसको बेस मान के इसका जिससे जितना डिस्टेंस है उतना ज्यादा पैसे देते जाओ. थर्ड वाले को इन दोनों को एक इस डिस्टेंस के ऊपर इन दोनों को पैसे मिलने चाहिए. This was said by 15th Finance Commission, not this. They said, I have ranked all of the states in 1 to 28. What you do here is, the 3 big states which have the highest per capita income, that is Telangana, Karnataka and Haryana. These 3 states, you calculate their average per capita income, and every state, whatever capita income they have, see the difference. Those who have high difference, give them more. Those who have less, give them. These 3 states have the highest per capita in the country. Take their average and now say Punjab. Their average is say 1 lakh rupees per capita income. Punjab has 1.5 lakh, or Punjab is less than this, say 80,000 rupees. Another state, Odisha, has 70,000 rupees. This state will get more, this state will get less. On an average of these 3. How will these 3 get money? These three will get money based on the two small states which have high per capita income, that is गोवा एंड, तो गोवा एंड सिक्किम का एवरेज देखो और इस एवरेज से इनका कंपेयर करो और इस डिफरेंस के हिसाब से पैसे दे दो. सो ऑल द स्टेट्स विल गेट मनी बेस्ड ऑन द डिफरेंस दे हैव विद द एवरेज इनकम ऑफ दीज थ्री स्टेट्स. द मोर द डिस्टेंस द मोर द मनी. रिवर्स होगा, लेस द डिस्टेंस less the money. How will these three get? They will get based on the difference between the average of Goa and Sikkim. So it's not this 1, 2, 3, 4 regular जो 15th ने किया था. 16th has given this principle. This is per capita, the GSDP difference from the frontier. Frontier defined is average of these three. So these two factors plus this factor is clear. The next factor they said is forest cover. Income distance I am saying, forget 1 to 28. I am saying three high states earning states are Telangana, Karnataka and Haryana. तीन बड़ी states हैं जिनके पास ज़्यादा पैसे हैं. Last use the Haryana metric. They are using an average of 3. They said calculate their average per capita income. Their average per capita income is say 1.5 lakh rupees. Now every state you calculate what the difference is with this average. The more the distance, more the money. But how am I comparing with these three? How these three will get it? Compare it with the average of Goa and Sikkim. इनका जिसका इनसे डिफरेंस होता जाएगा उस हिसाब से. इसका फॉर्मूला है. आई एम जस्ट टेलिंग यू द ब्रॉडर आइडिया. इन केस दे फ्रेम अ स्टेटमेंट ऑन दिस. आर दीज थ्री इंडिकेटर्स क्लियर? गोवा एंड सिक्किम छोटे स्टेट्स में सबसे ज्यादा पर कैपिटा इनकम है. अगर 1 to 28 रैंक करो, ये 1 और 2 है. Goa and Sikkim have the highest per capita GDP. Per capita why? Because फिर वो छोटी हो जाती हैं तो इसलिए per capita बढ़ जाएगा. I will only compare with the top. Top से distance बढ़ता जाएगा उतने पैसे आपको ज़्यादा मिलते जाएंगे. Because equity is a concern. तो top मेरे को पहले बताना पड़ेगा ना कौन है. 15 फाइनेंस कमीशन ने सबको रैंक कर दिया. तो फर्स्ट वॉज, थर्ड वॉज हरियाणा, फोर्थ वॉज केरला. सेड हरियाणा के बाद जितना डिस्टेंस बढ़ता जा रहा है उतने पैसे ज़्यादा होते जाएं, तो हरियाणा का उन्होंने बेंचमार्क बना दिया. हरियाणा को उतने पैसे, इन दोनों को कैसे पैसे मिलेंगे जितना इससे डिफरेंस है. इन तीनों को वहां से दे दो. दे सेड नो. दे सेड कि ये तीन स्टेट्स का एवरेज से डिफरेंस करो क्रिएट, एंड इन दोनों को, इन तीनों को इन दो से दो. ये सबसे हाईएस्ट है. ये लार्ज हाई है, ये हाईएस्ट है. दिस इज व्हाट द criteria. This is why an expert body got created, because the government would never be able to do this. गवर्नमेंट इन पांचों को फिर देती उसी हिसाब से जिस हिसाब से सरकार है वहां पे. Do you understand? ताकि सरकार बनी रहे वहां पे, नहीं तो फिर मनरेगा की पेमेंट रुक जाएगी. Is this clear? per capita income distance. यूटी का तो एक्सेप्ट कर लिया ना, तो सेंटर के पास है पैसा. क्यों नहीं? वो तो फिर रैंक ऐसे ही मिलेंगे ना. दिल्ली का जितना गैप होगा इस एवरेज से उस हिसाब से मिलेगा. दिल्ली का पॉपुलेशन इज मोर, दिस इज व्हाई दिस नॉट द टॉप, इवन इफ इट इज क्रिएटिंग वैल्यू. विद दैट विल बी हियर, दे विल गेट मनी हियर. विदाउट जो पार्लियामेंट, विदाउट जो लेजिस्लेचर है वो यूनियन ही देगा. तभी तो हटा दिया ना वहां पे. लद्दाख देयर इज स्टिल नॉट गवर्नमेंट. जम्मू एंड कश्मीर ऑल्सो, वो फीचर है बेस्ड ऑन वट एवर द पार्लियामेंट्री फीचर है, उस हिसाब से पैसे मिलेंगे. आर दीज थ्री फैक्टर्स क्लियर? वट इज द मीनिंग? नाउ फॉरेस्ट कवर, दे सेड टू थिंग्स. वन, वट इज द एब्सोल्यूट कवर, एंड द सेकेंड दे सेड परसेंटेज ग्रोथ ऑफ फॉरेस्ट फ्रॉम द ईयर 2013 to 2025. दिस इज हाउ आई विल चेक द forest cover. Last they said only forest cover. This is saying not just the absolute forest cover which you have. Second is also the percentage growth of forest which you have from 2013 to 25. Both the factors will be considered under forest cover. GDP factor is what they are saying. How much states are contributing to the total GSDP of all state. This was a performance factor. The total GSDP of all states, what is your contribution of your state? If Haryana has 10% contribution to the total GSDP of states, Haryana will get 10% of the money based on this factor. This is why you'll be reading in the news that southern states are getting more. Why? Because southern states have larger contribution. ये उनका ख्याल रखने के लिए दिया था factor. What is demographic performance? Now this is a critical factor. Understand what was the idea behind this. Last Finance Commission said the population figure will be on 91 census, but they wanted to move towards 11 census. So 15 Finance Commission said, we are going to give it on 2011, but those states which have controlled their population better, they will also get money. How? Under demographic performance, they started giving money on total fertility rate. जिनका fertility rate कम है, उनको पैसे ज़्यादा मिलेंगे. This year they said, we are not going to use total fertility rate because fertility rate is important for growth also. If the population does not grow, my growth will be compromised. So if I incentivize them on TFR, they will not increase their population. Perverse incentive बन जाएगा. Because they are getting money on controlling TFR, they will not be expanding population. फिर वो old care और demographic dividend खत्म होने वाली बात आ जाएगी. Aging population will be a problem. So they said, instead of TFR, we are going to give them on percentage growth of population between these years. Not on TFR. 1971 and 2011 के बीच में हर स्टेट का कितना परसेंटेज ग्रोथ हुआ है पॉपुलेशन का. Those who have more growth population, they are going to get, we are going to use the inverse of this, that is percentage growth of population between 1971 and 2011. Those who have grown more will get, these are all of the indicators which they have used for horizontal devolution. Is this clear? All of the factors and how the money is being distributed, how they have explained this. This is the first type of transfer which is coming from Finance Commission to states. Finance Commission is giving money from the center to the states. One, vertical devolution, that is 41%, and then second is, now there are two more things here, and this is why they have given money for other things also. Article 275, you know what is 275? What are statutory grants? Article 275, what are statutory grants? लक्ष्मीकांत में बहुत लिखते हैं statutory और discretionary grants. What are statutory grants? Article 275 says, clause 1 says, Parliament can create a law for giving money from center to states, those who are in need. And this particular clause 2 says, President is going to ask the Finance Commission to recommend for this money. Article 275. This is why it is called statutory grants, though the statute was never passed. Name is such because the Constitution says Parliament should create a law so that center can give money to the states who are in need. Who will give that, distribute that money? President is going to ask the Finance Commission to do that. Under this particular thing, this particular provision, Finance Commission, after vertical and horizontal, gives the principle for grants in aid. This is statutory grants which are to be recommended by Finance Commission. Article 282 says that if the center or the state believe for the welfare of the people they have to distribute grants, they can do that. This is what is called as discretionary grant. Discretionary grant comes in the form of centrally sponsored schemes. जब सेंटर का मन करेगा वो तब ये ग्रांट्स दे सकता है. Difference between the two is these discretionary grants have to be voted in the parliament, and this grants in aid, that is statutory grants, they are charged on consolidated fund. This money comes from the Consolidated Fund of India, it's charged, and this is money is which is expenditure made. Discretionary जो अलग से दिया है. Is the provision wise difference clear? Finance Commission will recommend this. This is centrally sponsored जो government करती रहती है from time to time. Jal Jeevan Mission, Manrega, number of different schemes. Centrally sponsored schemes are those where you have a distribution pattern between, and these funds are all tied. Meaning of tied is you have to follow the conditions follow होंगी तब तक नहीं होगा. For example, PM Shri फंस गया था scheme. Kerala government was not implementing it. The conditions were not being fulfilled. Kerala government then accepted they will do it. Why? Because there is substantial money coming from center to the states. Is difference between statutory and discretionary grants clear? Now coming to statutory grants, 15th Finance Commission had given a lot of grants based on different heads, principles बनाए थे. All of them have been stopped by 16th Finance Commission. That means they are not recommending. I'll tell you three major. ये सब Finance Commission ने दिया था. That was revenue deficit grant. That even after getting money, revenue deficit still exists with the states. This was given by all Finance Commissions. Second, sector-specific grants. For improvement of different sectors, agriculture, education, health, they used to give sector-specific grants. And finally, state-specific grants, some states need help. These three grants have been discontinued. This particular thing had happened with 14th also. 14th ने sector-specific grant नहीं दिए थे. 15th ने दिए, 16th ने दोबारा मना कर दिया. UPSC in that same year asked a statement, sector-specific grants were recommended by 14th Finance Commission. That was wrong. They did not recommend it. 15th did it. 16th again said no. 16th is giving grants only for two things. One, urban local bodies, and second, that is disaster management. These are the only two types of grants. I'll explain this also, okay, what type of grants, because last year they asked a comprehensive question on grants also. कितना पैसा मिला infrastructure को, कितना पैसा मिला education को as compared to Finance Commission. Basic idea should get clear here. This particular is statutory, Finance Commission. This is discretionary, centrally sponsored scheme. Principles, 16th Finance Commission said no to revenue deficit, no to sector specific, no to state specific. They have already given, only given not urban, rural also. Local self-governments and disaster management. Is the broader idea clear? What type of money they have given? This is your grant for rural and urban. For rural, there are two types of grants. One is basic grant and the other is performance grant. Performance grant is given to the local body and state performance. Urban has basic, performance and infrastructure component and urbanization premium. These are the grants which have been given by the Finance Commission, giving the principles how much should be given. One thing which you need to note down here is basic grant में सिर्फ tied funds हैं 50%. Tied means you have to spend the money where exactly we are saying. Wastewater treatment and sanitation. These are the two areas where to spend the money. Rest 50 you can use wherever you want. So basic grants given to rural local bodies, 50% of the basic grants are tied. Rest are free. None of these have that condition. सिर्फ यहाँ पे बेसिक पे टाइड है. 50% फॉर टू थिंग्स, जल जीवन मिशन और उस जगह पे पैसा स्पेंड करना है, वाटर एंड सैनिटेशन. रेस्ट आर अनटाइड, linked to performance but untied. This is what is your grant structure. So now what are the total types of funds which the center is giving to the states? I'll give you this PPT. This thing is all explained also. I'll give you this document so that you have a complete picture of this Finance Commission. One thing here, what exactly is the total money which the center is going to get from the, or center is going to give to the states? First, it is going to get vertical and horizontal devolution. This is what is called as Finance Commission transfers. 41% and horizontal, what they have told is clear. Second type of money is what they are going to get is grants in aid under Article 275. This is also called as Finance Commission grants. Two grants I told you, this the 15th had given number, this is not. The third type of money which they are getting is discretionary. Discretionary में centrally sponsored and also central sector. There are four type of funds coming from center to states: transfers, grants, and discretion, centrally sponsored and central sector. ये पूरा इसका, this is something which I explained under article 270 and article 280. This is under article 275 and this is article 282. Finance commission should not be a problem. Fiscal, now you should have a clear idea. अब इसके dynamics समझ आ जाएंगे survey में भी और budget में भी. Is this clear? Any doubts you have in this? Tomorrow we are going to discuss external sector. I'll give you a roughly idea trilemma or the current account, capital account, and how you have to do. Again, the basics only. All of this was basic, nothing advanced. Basics of external sector. There will be one more class there. I'll give you basics of GDP. GDP may, if there are certain terms, private, final, consumption, expenditure, the capital formation and all that. That in the other class. So we have total 4. Tomorrow external sector. After that we'll have this GDP or money related. Thank you. सेंट्रल सेक्टर, जिसमें सेंटर पूरा पैसा लगाती है, वो स्टेट को दे सकती है पैसा फॉर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन. टाइड का मतलब है अर्बन बॉडीज ने, आई थिंक इट्स फॉर रूरल ओनली. जस्ट चेक, इसमें लिखा है वो. व्हाट आई रिमेंबर इज रूरल के लिए तो टाइड पक्का है, अर्बन के लिए शायद हो सकता है. तो बेसिक ग्रांट्स फॉर बोथ टाइड विद यहीं पे जाना है, अनटाइड इज कहीं भी यूज करो.